Hello, I'm Hal Lublin.
And I'm Mark Gagliardi.
Since the dawn of humanity, one issue has gone unsettled. With the fate of the world in the balance, we're here to settle, once and for all.
Worst Best Picture Oscar winner.
That's right. Don't worry, everyone. We got this.
Podcast should have a theme song. Podcast should not have a theme song. Yes, they should. No, they shouldn't. They sound good. Yeah, but people are just going to skip past it. You know what? You're right. We got this.
And now, please welcome, presenting the award for this episode's guest, Hal Lublin and Mark Gagliardi.
In a year filled with thrills, spills, and chills, we're honored to be discussing the worst films to win Best Picture at the Oscars. Isn't that right, Mark?
That's right, Hal. And who's going to join us? We're about to find out. This envelope will let us know. And the nominee for this week's guest on We Got This with Mark and Hal is Craig Cackowski. And the winner of guest for this week's episode of We Got This with Mark and Hal is Craig Cackowski.
Oh my God. Oh, excuse me, Helen Mirren. Oh, what an honor. Oh, it's been so long. It's been so long since I was on We Got This. Was it the best sketch show debacle that made them not invite me back for a while? It may have been, but I had a good feeling knowing I was the only nominee in this category. But still I was sweating it out a bit. This is for you, Mom. Who I watched the Oscars with every year since 1977. Oh, come on. I just started. Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be on We Got This, talking about movies, even if they are bad movies.
Hi, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Hi, friends.
Thanks for being here, buddy.
What an honor. Well, I mean, for two reasons, I'm the perfect guest for this episode.
Yes, you are.
Because I'm an Oscars fan to the point of being perhaps an Oscars apologist.
Oh.
And we may get into that. I find myself defending the honor of the Oscars probably more than they deserve to have their honor defended. And also I like to rank things.
That's true. We do know this well about you. Yeah. For Craig's list. When do you think the Oscars started to lose credibility with people? If you think that you mentioned being an apologist, and I've noted as I've gotten older, like when I was a kid, I was like, whatever the Best Picture Oscar winner is, that obviously is the movie of the year. And then, I don't know, was it the campaigns happening? Was it the advent of the Oscar season being a thing and then it becoming its own separate outside of show business world? What do you think it was?
I think it was specifically the Seinfeld English Patient episode.
Really?
I mean, the mid-90s maybe feels around the time where, I mean, I don't know. We weren't around in the 40s. Maybe everyone was like, gentleman's agreement? Really?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like in our lifetime, there is always a Best Picture backlash. Because so many people wait to see the film until it's won, and then they're like, I didn't get it. I don't get the big deal.
Yeah.
And I think like the Harvey Weinstein, campaigning, only more horrific in retrospect.
Right.
Everybody knew he was a jerk then, but actually a criminal jerk. But of like the amount of, once we knew that there was an icky kind of politicking going on, behind the scenes. And I think as the voting body got older and more out of touch, there were probably some more egregious choices for a while. But I think I would like to debunk the idea that the Best Picture winner always sucks. Because clearly that's not the case.
Ones. Sure.
There have been some great ones. Look at the Best Picture winners. You got The Godfather, and then a bunch of others. No, you got The Godfather Part 2.
No, you don't have to. You got The Shot. No, you got Pulp. No,
But you have Casablanca, and you have Schindler's List, and you have Annie Hall, and Godfather 2, and Return of the King, Parasite, recently, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, more often than not is, if not the best picture of the year, it's a top 5 movie for the year. And that's a pretty good batting percentage, I think.
Well, I appreciate you saying that too, because I think on this show, a lot of times we try to look at the best of things and not the worst of things. We are doing a worst of episode. So it is important, I think, to bear in mind that these movies are generally, Oscar winners are generally pretty good.
In my mind, there are 2 ways to attack this. You were about to say before we started recording, so I want to see if if we're on the same wavelength. There are 2 different ways to interpret this. One is, did a bad movie win Best Picture? So of these, which is the worst movie to win Best Picture? But there's
95 contenders as of this recording. Yeah. There's about to be another one in a couple of weeks. So there's a finite amount to look at.
Yeah. And then,
which is the worst? It's a simple question. Which is the worst of those 95?
But I think the more interesting way to look at it is, there are obviously, you make a good point, which is by and large, your Best Picture winner is going to be among the top 5 and now the top 10 movies of the year by different metrics, by reception from critics, by box office, by just the general artistry of the film being made. But I think there are years here, and there were some that really popped out at me as I was looking at not only the winners, but the other films nominated, where you look at it and go, they got it wrong. This was not the Best Picture this year.
Yeah.
And just to throw one out there, and I don't think this will win. I feel like I'm in the minority here. I think Titanic winning the year it did was a mistake. I think there was a fever in 1997 around that film. It was number 1 forever. Looking at it, number 1, I think there was a better film to take its place in that category, which is Boogie Nights. It did not get a Best Picture nomination because there were only 5 at the time. But I think LA Confidential was the best movie of that year. And it might have taken screenplay, and I know Kim Basinger won Best Supporting Actress, but that to me would be an example of the wrong film won egregiously. There are egregious examples of films where you go, how did that not win? Is that the other way? Are those the 2 ways you were thinking, Craig?
Absolutely. Like the worst choice that the Academy has ever made, which I would say is the biggest gulf between the winner and then the thing that we feel should have won. Mm-hmm. But that's a little trickier. Some of the egregious ones that are often brought up is like Dances with Wolves over Goodfellas. Yeah, right. Goodfellas is the better picture. I kind of have a soft spot for Dances with Wolves. I don't think it's a bad movie at all. You've got Driving Miss Daisy winning in the year of Do the Right Thing, which, especially because both movies concern racism, looks especially egregious in retrospect. However, Do the Right Thing not even nominated. So I think we have to then only consider the nominated films, because the more film history moves forward, the more you could look at any year and say, actually, the best picture was this, but nobody thought that at the time, and it was nowhere near contention. Like Boogie Nights, it got some nominations, got acting nominations, but and probably writing as well. But it was way too risky for it to be a best picture contender at the time. So I think we'd have to compare the winner against the potential nominees and then see where the widest gulf is.
Yeah. Let me pitch this to you guys then, because I'm coming into this looking at both movies that are bad, sometimes retrospectively bad, and some movies that were just, in weak years, and also looking at that question of where the widest gulf is between the movie that should have won and the movie that did. So let me propose this idea to you. I have divided these up. It's interesting that that's what keeps coming up, because that is the largest of the categories. I propose this. We'll take a break in the middle of the episode. The first half of the episode, we will look at movies that may or may not be considered objectively bad. And those fall into, I think, 3 categories: the relics, the overhyped, and the white saviors. Then on the second half, we can take a look at the robbers. And I've got a list of 6 here. And I'm sure that we can take a look at more than that. And then we'll see if one comes out of the robbers and then one comes out of the first half, maybe we look at those 2 against one another. How does that sound?
Yeah, I like that.
Great. So what do you guys want to start with? If we're going to do the first half, we've got the relics, the white saviors, and the overhyped.
I also want to throw this out there. Have the 2 of you seen all 95 Best Picture winners?
We have not.
I've seen a good number of them.
Yeah, especially the older ones I haven't seen.
I've seen more recent ones. I've seen a bunch of the middle, like 60s, 70s, like somewhere in there. I have a lot of coverage. You've seen
I've done dives into chunks of each of them to try and get an exemplary sample for purposes of viewing this, but we are really banking on your knowledge here, Craig.
Have you seen this movie? I've done dives into chunks.
Yeah. Listen, man, we've all done dives into chunks.
We've all done dives into chunks.
I'm going to stop there.
As I said, big Oscar nerd. Have I seen all 95 Best Picture winners? I sure have. Have I ranked all 95 Best Picture winners in preferential order? I sure have done that. So I can tell you right now that the worst picture is The Broadway Melody, 1929.
Does that feel a perfect place to start?
Does that feel fair? It does not feel fair.
Here's the thing.
It's like saying the worst artist in this gallery is this 4-year-old.
So that one falls under the relics. I've got 2 movies under the relics. 1929's The Broadway Melody and 1931's Cimarron. The Broadway Melody, that was one that I did one of those dive into the chunks of. So I dove into the chunks of The Broadway Melody, including the opening, which I loved. They played George M. Cohan's Give My Regards to Broadway as the opening number during the credits of that movie. And then every song after it was bad. Like that song was already a hit. And then the rest of the songs in that movie are not good. And also the movie begins with just a cacophony of it's a building where it's a music publishing house. And the first 5 minutes of that movie are just 4 different songs being played simultaneously. I can't believe that's how a movie begins.
Well, if you look at the first 2 winners of in Oscar history, you have Wings the very first year, which was the only silent film until The Artist much later, which we can debate, whether that was a silent film or not. Yeah. But you would imagine after, 30 years of making silent films that by 1928 they were pretty good at it. And Wings, hey, do I want to dive into a 2.5-hour silent film that often? No, but when I watched Wings, I'm like, this holds up pretty well. It's exciting. It's got great real aerial photography of for 1928. This is where movies were, and that they could make a pretty darn good silent film. And then the first year of the talkies, 1929, and there's an immediate dip in these early years of talkies. Nearly every ranked list of Best Picture winners I've seen contains 3 of the 5 at the bottom, including my list, are Cimarron, as you mentioned, Cavalcade, which is 1933, and The Broadway Melody. So I think, but again, it feels so unfair because they didn't know how to make talkie movies yet. The Broadway Melody is just or musicals. It's a mess. It's a mess. And Cavalcade is like the stodgiest. It's like his Noel Coward play. There's very little camera movement. It's just like somebody put a camera in front of people doing a play.
Right. And that's the era we're in of films, is they're adapting shows, both plays and musicals, and putting them up on screen.
Yeah.
Because, this is something that which we already know people talk. So let's just adapt this. We'll show it to people. And it's, notable obviously in that it gives access to people around the country who couldn't go to Broadway to see these plays to actually watch them performed professionally. But it does feel like the only thing that maybe until you get to It Happened One Night, which is a very interesting film. I think the other thing to think about with all these is their place in history. If I were to show, the thing that struck me the first time I ever watched It Happen One Night was if I showed this to someone without them having any knowledge of the historical significance of this film, they would just think, well, this is just a formulaic romantic comedy, not realizing this is the film that established, every romantic comedy you have seen your entire life it's on the family tree that this is the root of. So that's a great winner. All Quiet on the Western Front is this odd, amazing, deep film that snuck in number 3. But, by and large, a lot of the, when you look at the things that are even nominated, there are so many adaptations of stage shows. That goes into the 40s as well.
There's just a lot of turkeys in those early years. I'd throw in Life of Emile Zola, Great Ziegfeld, even as much as I like Bing Crosby, Going My Way is not great. There's some stodgy ones back then.
Yeah. Just some forgettable stuff. It seems like the Bing Crosby one in particular is it's not bad. It's just forgettable. I highly recommend going to Variety and checking out the contemporaneous Variety review of Broadway Melody from 1929, because I think this person was a theater critic. And boy, is it a hilarious dive into the pictures are coming for your theater jobs. They're putting theater on stage in movie houses, and they're doing it poorly. Now, why would you go see a musical on Broadway for $4.40 when you can watch a movie at the Cineplex for 75 cents? And you know what? That seemed to be an early canary in all kinds of coal mines. Let's jump ahead to the other relic on this list, and that's Cimarron, which is on there. It's the first Western to win 1931, and it was problematic in that it's over the top. It's got everything going for it. It was very expensive and overhyped. The acting is hilariously over the top. It's the story of a man who badgers his wife into joining him in Oklahoma and then leaves her repeatedly over the course of 40 years. And every race is depicted terribly in this except white people.
Sure. What a surprise.
Yeah. I mean, holy moly, this movie.
I'd say save yourself 2 hours and watch the Drunk History episode on the Oklahoma Land Rush because we covered it.
Done.
Yeah, way better. So out of all of these that we've discussed, do you take Cimarron because it's the most offensive? Or do you go just because it's one thing to be bad, which, bad, but it's also monumentally racist, which is something we will find is a problem just in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, we got a few of those.
Because we have a whole separate category of white savior narratives. I think Cimarron is maybe not even the worst of those, and that's covered. My inclination is to vote for Broadway Melody because I do have it worst on my list, and that seems to be the consensus that it's the worst one to win. However, it does feel like beaten up on a 4-year-old.
Yeah, that's
well, that 4-year-old shouldn't have wandered into the bar.
Yeah, guess what? Get out of this bar, 4-year-old. This ain't for you.
Yeah.
This is for 95-year-olds, not 95-year-olds, people who are 95, like the Oscars. Let's jump to the white saviors. I've got 3 on this list: Green Book, Crash, and Driving Miss Daisy. Though Crash isn't really a white savior unless you count Paul Haggis as the self-designed theme bludgeoning white savior of this idea. What do you guys think? We are 3 white guys talking about this, by the way.
We are 3 white guys.
Yes, the white.
I do not mind Driving Miss Daisy. I was very happy when it won in 1989. Yeah. It's a stage play. It's still done fairly frequently. James Earl Jones did it on Broadway not too long ago. It's a small story, and it was very much based on this guy, the playwright's own mother. So I don't know. I feel like it's been unfairly lumped in with some of the worst important Hollywood movies about race because it really is just like a really small two-hander of a movie. I think the performances are good. Again, is it especially embarrassing that it won in the year of Do the Right Thing, which had a much more modern and vibrant and important and funny and heartbreaking take on race? Yes, that's especially egregious. So it looks like a really wrong-headed decision by the Academy. And even I forget what else was up that year, but Dead Poets Society, they could have gone for that.
Yep.
Or
My Left Foot, Field of Dreams,
My Left Foot,
4th of July.
So this one really ought to be in that category of The Robbers. It's a pretty wide gap.
I agree with Craig. I think it is a small story. It's really not about, she doesn't save him. Really, he saves her. It's about their relationship to one another. And it's set in a time where obviously he's going to be discriminated against heavily because he's black, but she is also discriminated against heavily because she's Jewish. So there's a bombing at the synagogue. Like, these are things that were happening in the American South and all over at this time. So it does feel weird. And there's something in, like the oft imitated performance of Morgan Freeman, which is a brilliant performance that makes it feel super stereotypical, but he's playing he's not playing a stereotype character. I don't think. I think he's playing a 3-dimensional human being, and just the voice, I think, clues people in and goes, look, that's intensely racist without maybe digging into it more. But this is the time where Spike Lee, Do the Right Thing, doesn't get nominated. Malcolm X doesn't get nominated a few years later. He was shut out by the Academy for way, way, way too long. They've only recently started to, he has 2 Oscars now, I think. But, it took forever for him to be recognized. It took a social movement, which, you would rather that not be the case, but better that than it never happened and it just remain Oscars so white forever. So this is, it's tough to, like Craig said, we're not going to blame stuff that didn't make it in. We can't blame it for taking the spot of something that never got nominated, even though it's a crime that film wasn't nominated. You can't go off of, I've never seen anybody go, we didn't deserve this. Here, you take it, except when it's mistakenly given to your film. And even then, it's gladly handed over because you do not want to be the person who stole the Oscar from Moonlight.
What about Green Book? By the way, I was going to say I should change this. It shouldn't be the white saviors. It should be the whitewashing. Because I guess there's, that seems more broadly accurate, I suppose. But, Green Book definitely is white savior.
And I think Hollywood just has a tradition of like self-congratulatory, important movies about important topics, Gentleman's Agreement is low on my list as well, which is about anti-Semitism.
That is, Gregory Peck doing,
going undercover as a Jew. Yeah. Like it's clunky and poorly handled, and Hollywood is really patting itself on the back for it.
Yeah.
Man, I really, Green Book and Crash are top contenders.
Well, I think Green Book is particularly tough in this because you mentioned Hollywood likes to take important stories and do its Hollywood version of important stories. And normally if it's fiction, it's no harm, no foul. But Green Book, not necessarily no harm, no foul, but less harm, less foul than Green Book, which was ostensibly a true story. And then the family of the musician, that Mahershala Ali played, Paul Shirley's family was like, this is not true. Like the whole notion of making this movie from one point of view and then it being like, then it just, the family of the true story not being down with this movie winning Best Picture, not being down with this movie being made. You know what I mean? That feels like a particularly egregious crime in this regard.
In terms of a movie, like, I just rewatched it recently. Just put it on and watched it just to see, like, all right, let's see this again. And I remember enjoying it. Like, for what it is, it's fine. It is, in terms of hitting every base it's supposed to for the movie that it is. It does very well. Mahershala Ali is brilliant in it. He's so good. Viggo Mortensen is a lot of fun. It doesn't feel like, this is one that definitely, Craig, you were talking about, like, the Oscars patting themselves on the back. Basically, like, this film solved racism. Yeah. And it's obviously wholly inaccurate. It didn't deserve to win Best Picture. If you watch it with the idea of like, I'm watching a white fantasy, then you go, okay, it's fine for what it is. It is not a Best Picture winner. Like, just not. It's insane to me that it won. Insane.
The nature of the movie itself, like Crash may have been clunky and heavy handed, but I think it was made in good faith. It feels like Green Book was not made in good faith. What do you think, Craig?
Think so?
How was it not made in good faith? I think they thought they were.
It's not the true story of what happened. If the guy that wrote it knew it wasn't the true story, if the people making it knew it wasn't the true story, if the family had said this isn't the true story in the course of while the movie was being made, which apparently happened. You know what I mean?
That's also a Hollywood tradition with biopics of like, they make stuff up all the time.
Yeah, I guess
it's never the real story of what happened to the person. I don't know. This is a tough one, choosing between these two undeserving winners.
Yeah.
I agree with Hal that Mahershala Ali is fantastic in it. He had already gotten an Oscar, so I don't know if he deserved a second one for this, but he's wonderful in the role.
Brilliant.
Like,
I agree.
He's doing his best. Viggo's doing a little forget about it thing, and like the vibe that the two of them have is entertaining.
Yeah.
But of all the recent winners, as I said, as somebody who will frequently defend the Academy, this was the one that blew my mind the most of like, how could you do this in 2018? Because it is driving Miss Daisy all over again. And, supposedly they had, updated the voting base. I think they've done a much better job in the years since this, but that one really, I mean, this might be one of the top contenders for the other category, I think, because I would have gone for Alfonso Cuarón's Roma, which is a masterpiece, and Cuarón had won Best Director earlier, and so it seemed like we were maybe heading for a Roma win, and then when it went to Green Book, it just my heart just sunk, because it was such a retrograde, relic of the past. I did, in compiling my list, knowing that I wasn't going to beat up on the early ones, I had kind of 4 contenders that were in mind. And so I went to see what's streaming. And the only one that was streaming currently on things that I pay for is Crash. So this might be a little recency bias because I watched a half hour of Crash earlier today, but man, is it bad.
Yeah,
it is
just straight up not good.
It is the most heavy-handed script. It is the most inaccurate depiction of life in Los Angeles. There is nothing anybody's saying in there that a human being has ever said to another human being. And it wants you to know how important it is and how much it's thought about race, and that this is what racism is, that people just say, epithets at each other, right out of the gates. There's a long speech by Ludacris about how can these people look at us like they think we're gangbangers. They think we have guns, but we do have guns, and let's go carjack them right now. Of ooh, you pulled out the rug for me there, Paul Haggis,
Yeah.
And it's like Mahershala Ali. There's good performances in this as well. There's some fantastic actors in it. So, but in terms of what feels like the most heavy-handed and self-important and self-congratulatory, I think Crash beats Green Book as worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so right now we're looking at the Broadway Melody and Crash. Green Book, you're not off the hook yet because of Roma. You've now been launched into the robbers category.
Thank you.
One more before we go to break, and that is the overhyped. This is movies that are big, huge budget movies that are just fine. And the 3 that I have on my list are The Greatest Show on Earth, Around the World in 80 Days, and Chicago. Are there any others you can think of that
yeah. I think Chicago's
put Titanic
really good.
On it? Look, I think Chicago's really good too, but I'm giving it, I'm putting it up there because simply we talked about that being, one of those Harvey Weinstein gross. It was just, did it win just because it was on the list on Harvey Weinstein's list of hype this movie up?
There's a great book called Oscar Wars. I'm sure you've read it, Craig, or you are familiar with it. If not, you would love it.
Yes.
But yeah, it. He was seeking out movies that he thought could win. He was targeting movies that he thought could win. He can't make people vote. He could certainly make them more visible, but I think Chicago was a worthy winner. I think maybe Shakespeare in Love is the more questionable one because it was going up against Saving Private Ryan, but they split that down the middle because the best director could have gone either way. Best picture could have gone either way. So they split them in half. And each one was the consolation prize for either the director or the producers of the film. So I think Chicago, if I'm remembering right, kind of reinvigorated the sort of like Dances with Wolves.
It brought musicals back.
It brought musicals back. Dances with Wolves brought back the epic Western.
Yeah.
So I think it's notable for that reason. I don't think it's...
Look, man, I loved Chicago. This is the list that I'm compiling based on going online, reading reviews, doing this,
Right. When I think about
trying to look objectively, because subjectively, I loved it and I love a musical.
When I think about overhyped, I think about Titanic simply for the reason that there is a better movie about the sinking of the Titanic out there, and it's 1954's Night to Remember.
Yeah.
That is a vastly superior movie about the Titanic. The fact that he chose to create a fictional story about a ship full of really interesting actual stories that he shunts to the side to make the most generic love story possible. But you add My Heart Will Go On to that. You put Leonardo DiCaprio in it at the height of his Tiger Beat cuteness, and Kate Winslet, and who are both fantastic. I mean, the cast is practically untouchable for how good all of them are. I mean, Kathy Bates is the unsinkable Molly Brown, is maybe the best piece of casting in that movie. But on a whole, everything that is great about that movie happens outside of the main plot. And that to me makes it a way overhyped movie. Craig, how do you feel about that? I don't know if we've ever talked about this before.
First of all, I was shocked with gags, including Chicago as a sworn musical theater. I think Chicago is great. Like that was a shocking inclusion. I haven't heard that much hate for it. So maybe I'm looking the wrong places. Yeah. But the thing is, guys, Titanic was never not going to win that year. It was a humongous movie. It was such a crowd pleaser. Like, that's so rare that the number one box office movie also is just like the consensus pick. I mean, it's James Cameron. It's overlong. It's overwrought. It's really cheesy in places, but especially I think for people a little younger than us, you know, if you were in high school, you know, when Titanic came out, there's people where it hits them in the feels and all, you know, so that might be a generational thing. Yeah, it's not one of my favorites. There's some other epics from the 80s that would be in this category. I think like Gandhi, Out of Africa, The Last Emperor. I think people would throw The English Patient in there as well. I will always stick up for The English Patient, but is it slow? Is it long? Is it ponderous? Does it feel really important and meaningful at all times? Yes, it does. So I think that's why that Seinfeld episode was so effective, I think, because The English Patient is the kind of movie that the average person is not seeing until they feel pressured. I guess I got to see the Best Picture winner. And then they're bored out of their skull by it. But I saw it early on. And, you know, I think it's a beautiful movie. So I'm not going to beat up on it, but I understand like how something like that fits the category. Of those, I think the worst is Around the World in 80 Days.
Yeah. Why is that?
It is from, you know, the 50s is when the studios were starting to compete with television a little bit. And this is when you're introducing Cinerama and CinemaScope and, you know, a lot of big budget musicals and Cecil B. DeMille epics like Greatest Show on Earth. And Around the World in 80 Days is 3 hours long, and it's nothing but every star in Hollywood showing up in a cameo. And it's like, there's Sinatra. That's pretty much all it is. Of like, it's not funny, it's really boring, and it never ends.
It's just showing that it's better than television. It's interesting that you mentioned, we've got now 2 movies that are using new technology that win Best Picture in a time when they are using new technology. But if you strip away the novelty of that tech, then it's not a good movie. You know what I mean? Like Broadway Melody, if you strip away the fact that it's the first fully talky musical, you're like, okay, well, it was doing that. That was the technology it had. What did it do with it? What it could. Around the World in 80 Days, it's Cinerama or CinemaScope. And it's, what are they doing with that? Well, they're doing everything they can. They're throwing everything at it. And then you go, well, now we have these huge, epic, sweeping movies all the time. So that's not the novelty, the story, the acting, the everything, all the elements coming together. That's the thing. And yeah, Around the World in 80 Days, I'm very happy with that one being there. I actually didn't dislike Greatest Show on Earth because I'm a fan of both Emmett Kelly and Lou Jacobs. And the fact that those 2 clowns were in that movie. Yeah. To me, those
clowns were great.
Those clowns were great. Jimmy Stewart, the plot of that movie is bonkers. That, you know, you wouldn't be suspicious of knowing that there was a murderer on the loose and also that there was a clown in your troupe that never took his makeup off. That doesn't seem a little shady.
Yeah, I had heard for years that was one of the worst winners. And so I was, you know, you're always grading everything on a curve. So there's some that I was like pleasantly surprised, like, it wasn't that bad. And so I agree with you on Greatest Show on Earth. It's like, it's clearly in the bottom third of winners, but it's not one of the worst.
No, but it's Technicolor footage of Ringling Brothers Circus in the mid 20th century. So it's, as a time capsule, it's something anyways.
And if you saw the Fabelmans, that was the movie that inspired young Spielberg.
That's right. He was recreating the train crash. Before we go to break.
Yeah.
So far we have a Broadway Melody, Crashing Around the World in 80 Days. Those are all finalists. Craig, I'm just curious, which decade, and we haven't completed the 2020s yet, which decade do you think got it right the most? Where you look at it and go, these are almost all of them are good winners. I have an answer. I'm curious what yours is.
There are, you know, when I was looking for picks, like I thought again of like, I don't want to beat up on the early ones. Like, let's pick something from our lifetime probably. But as I started looking at the 60s, 70s and 90s, like there were too many bad choices. You know, there were somewhere that they bypassed a better movie, but I don't see many bad movies there. Like the worst one I had in the 90s is Braveheart, which I don't think is a bad movie at all.
No.
It's Mel Gibson, so that's points against.
Yeah. That's an issue.
But I think the 90s has a pretty stacked lineup. And of course the 70s is like the decade, for American film. I think I had Patton as my worst one from the 70s, cause it's a little fascist, It's John Milius. I will also, Hal, will hate this, but I think Rocky is an overrated film.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you pick that year? Would you pick Network? Taxi Driver?
I would gone with Taxi Driver, I think, but you've also got All the President's Men in Network. Is Rocky bad? No, it's a really charming, it's the little indie that could really, like, it's one of the more shocking upset winners, ever, but I don't know. It's so mumbly.
Yeah, it is. It is a very
mumbly movie. Like
it is very mumblecore.
It's early mumblecore. Yeah,
but it's uplifting. It's a great uplifting story.
Yeah,
it's not $1 Million Baby, which is just sad Rocky.
Again, I am very much it's like you with Titanic. Like, I hate to be the person to badmouth a movie that's so treasured by so many people. Sure. But I also came to it late. I think I was in college and was a real film snob. I'm like, this isn't good.
Yeah, you came to it at the wrong time. But it also shares with Titanic that it was the movie of its moment. More so than any of the other movies, which are all, there are no bad ones in that collection. So
yeah, but what were you thinking? 70s or 90s?
70s by far.
I think it's the 70s.
They're almost everyone's a banger. So it's hard. The 90s are also good. The 40s, they're crazy eras, but I think the 70s as a whole is a decade. I look at it and go all right, yep, okay, good, 1, 2, and the ones that don't win, you have The Godfather Part 2 the same year as Chinatown and The Conversation. Like there's so many good movies. That's one of those times where the changing of the guard was happening. So you had all these fresh voices and then like George Harrison's first album after the Beatles, just everything comes pouring out and it's brilliant.
One of the many things that I rank is the best years overall. And my top 2 years for the overall pool of nominees are 75 and 74. So 75, you have One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the winner, but you've got Jaws, Dog Day Afternoon, Nashville, and then Barry Lyndon, which is kind of a divisive Kubrick film, but I happen to like it. But it's unbelievable how much they got it right back then and how many good movies were being made.
Yeah. Well, when we come back from our break, we're going to talk about the times they definitely got it wrong. And, we are going to come away with the worst Best Picture Oscar winner of all time. That is coming up after the break.
Coming up after the break, worst Best Picture Oscar winner here on the Maximum Fun Network.
I'm Emily Fleming.
And I'm Jordan Morris.
We're real comedy writers.
And real friends.
And real cheapskates.
We say, why subscribe to expensive streaming services when you can stream tons of insane movies online for free?
Yeah, as long as you're fine with 25 randomly inserted, super loud car insurance commercials.
On our podcast, Free with Ads, we review streaming movies from the darkest corner of the internet's bargain bin.
From the good to the weird to the holy, look at Van Damme's big old butt.
Free with Ads, a free podcast about free movies that's worth the price of admission.
Every Tuesday on MaximumFun.org or your favorite pod spot.
Hello, everyone out there. Thank you for coming to our service.
Yes.
We are ready to heal you. We are Ross and Carrie. We are faith healers. Yes, you there.
Yes, sir. You have a spirit of
not listening to enough podcasts.
We have the solution for that.
Oh, we can cure you.
You should listen to Oh No, Ross and Carrie. Hallelujah. It's on Maximum Fun.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you there. Gladys.
A spirit of boredom?
Oh my goodness, we have the solution for you. It is to listen to the podcast
Oh No, Ross and Carrie.
This is Mark Gagliardi's 507th episode of We Got This. It's probably a lot more than that, right?
How many? No, we haven't hit 500 yet. We're about to hit 500.
Okay.
I think in the fall we'll hit 500, yeah.
Amazing.
But why not?
All right. We have talked about that first interpretation of worst Best Picture winners, which is the movies that are just not that great. Now let's go on to The Robbers. This is movies that are good, but there were other movies that year that were better. For this one, you guys just want to throw some out because I've got a few. I know that you guys have got a few. Craig, you want to go first?
I've already submitted Green Book over Roma, so I'd like that to be in the mix. And then I think another famous one is How Green Is My Valley over Citizen Kane.
Sure. That's the biggest one of all time. How is How Green Is My Valley? I've not seen it.
Well, it's a John Ford movie about Welsh coal miners, and it's about as exciting as that sounds. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's like, it's not revolutionizing the art form like Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane, another, when we covered this on the Craigslist podcast, it's amazing. Like, it's a funny movie. It's an entertaining movie. It's exciting, in addition to all of the technical breakthroughs that it did. So just with the Oscar backlash, I think it's one of those movies that has like the greatest movie of all time backlash of like, and people see it and they're like, yeah, it was fine.
Yeah.
But, it really is like an incredibly entertaining movie in addition to being groundbreaking. So I think that counts for a lot, but I don't think anyone seriously thought it was going to win then. Like the backlash against it in Hollywood and against Wells had already started, so I don't know enough to know if How Green Was My Valley was considered an upset over like what else might have won, but I don't think anybody actually went into that ceremony thinking that Wells would win actor, director, or picture.
Was this a fear of Hearst thing at that point? Was that what was happening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He spread all of the bad press about it. And I think there was pressure among the voters to not go for Wells there. And there was just backlash again. He was an arrogant guy who didn't make a lot of friends also. So there was a huge backlash, against him. John Ford, I believe, won 4 Best Director Oscars more than anybody else. So like he was fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you can skip How Green Was My Valley. You won't hate it if you see it, but you won't remember much about it, as I have not remembered much about it.
Well, let me ask you this then, because the thing that I've latched onto that I love about looking at it from this angle is that gulf. The gulf between what won and what should have won. And I'm wondering, if I'm way off base, let me know, should we try to find a quantifiable way, whether it is a number 1 to 10, a letter grade A through F, to quantify the gulf? Because we're going to have to make some decisions coming up here. I think that quantifying that gulf might be a good way to look at this particular section of that. And I wonder if it's not a terribly high version of the gulf, because that movie is good, but Citizen Kane is so great. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how to quantify it necessarily. I have also 2 more submissions, which I think were, ones that you guys might agree with as well, which is, and again, I'm like, this is just totally in retrospective, like what is an all-time film? It might not have really had a chance to win on the day. But if it was nominated, so here's 2 movies that were nominated for Best Picture. I don't know how close they actually were, but is Raiders of the Lost Ark better than Chariots of Fire, guys?
That was the first one I was going to throw out there.
Yes.
And is E.T. slightly better than Gandhi?
Yes.
So I would submit those 2 Spielberg movies. I mean, you could go for Tootsie or E.T. Yeah. I like E.T. a little better. I love Tootsie, of course. The Verdict, also 82. Those are 3 of my top 100 movies of all time.
Yeah.
And they went for Gandhi, the far, more traditional, long ass, slow biopic choice. Chariots of Fire was a huge, upset at the time. Like, nobody thought it would win. I think Reds, the Beatty film, was the front runner, and maybe some people thought On Golden Pond would win. I don't think Raiders really had a chance. The nomination was its victory, but in retrospect, I mean, come on, Raiders is a top 10 movie of all time, and Chariots of Fire is pretty boring.
The song's good. Well,
theme, good song.
Yeah. Slow motion running. Like, it did give us a trope. It gave us the slow motion running to that song trope.
I'll throw out 2. One, I don't know if The Gap is great enough. And that is Tom Jones. I'm not saying anything bad about Tom Jones, but one of my favorite movies is Lilies of the Field. I think it is a beautiful movie. Oh. It's a fantastic movie. Great, not early, but early to mid Cindy Poitier performance. Just like a great, again, like the Oscars generally don't favor small stories as much, which is why things like Driving Miss Daisy, even Parasite, I think is a smaller story. It just has something bigger to say. But I would have liked to have seen that win. I don't know if the gap is great enough. That's one. Am I like way off base here, Craig?
No, I don't think so.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that could be in the mix. Yeah.
Another is just because I remember it's maybe one of the most notable robberies in Oscar history, and that's Out of Africa winning over The Color Purple.
Yeah.
Because that was, there were a lot of, that was supposed to be Whoopi Goldberg's year. That movie was supposed to, it's, again, a gut-wrenching, great movie.
And everybody knows and everybody has seen and everybody holds in high regard The Color Purple. There's not been the Out of Africa musical and subsequent movie musical based on the original source material of the movie Out of Africa, but there very recently has been for The Color Purple. And that's a testament to the longevity of that story over a simple love story of Meryl Streep with an accent and Robert Redford with a rifle.
Is this the first movie, now that the musical's been nominated, Craig? I figure you'll know this. The first time that two adaptations of the same work. So first you have the film adaptation, then the adaptation of the Broadway musical of the movie of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an adaptation of the film.
The first time it's been nominated or the first time it's been made?
That an adaptation of a film has been nominated. Like they both have been nominated for Best Picture and neither one will win, sadly.
I feel like it has happened, but I can't grab it off the top of my head.
Would you count Romeo and Juliet to West Side Story no, that wouldn't be.
That's a stretch, but yeah,
that's
basically
a stretch. That's a source material.
Same story.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw out, I think it was 1994. Again, not a bad movie in the same way How Green Is My Valley. Not a bad movie. Forrest Gump is a great movie. I enjoyed it. I had a great time watching it. I thought that Tom Hanks was brilliant in it. I thought that the way that it covered the mid 20th century was brilliant, but it was up against The Shawshank Redemption and Pulp Fiction in that year. Or is that gulf wide enough between those two, or was it just a stacked year? What do you guys think?
I think Forrest Gump has had more backlash since than it actually had in the year. I don't think it had very much backlash at the time. I think like it's very kind of naive take on American history and maybe like the depiction of minority characters, looks maybe a little more embarrassing in retrospect. But at the time, Forrest Gump was humongous, huge blockbuster, pretty beloved overall. My favorite nominee that year was actually Quiz Show, the Redford movie.
It was a blast.
Love that movie. But of course, Shawshank and Pulp Fiction are all timers as well. That might be like due to the collective weight, and Four Weddings and a Funeral, I think is maybe also better than Forrest Gump as well. That was a pretty good group of nominees.
Yeah.
So
and is the gulf of that one would you put Forrest Gump as the number 5 on that list?
I think it is out of those 5 movies.
Really? So the gulf might be the widest that it's not even the number 2. It's not How Green Is My Valley
when the winner was the worst.
Silver.
I'd say Forrest Gump's maybe better than Four Weddings, but it's close.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's hard because I don't mind Forrest Gump at all.
Yeah. Again, I love it, but I think Pulp Fiction Shawshank Redemption is amazing. I think Pulp Fiction is a masterpiece.
Right. But I think that the thing, obviously the way it was shot and edited is one thing that made it stand out, but really it was Tarantino's dialogue. I mean, you get a good taste of it in True Romance, and then along comes, and Reservoir Dogs, but then along comes Pulp Fiction, which in addition to being his style of dialogue is a massive hit. And then he wins the screenwriting Oscar. So I think that movie was like that, sometimes you get that award. It's really like everything you did was good. We're giving you this one. Another movie is winning Best Picture. So it's not like wasn't recognized.
Yeah, that's true. What is Spike Lee? Spike Lee's only won for screenplays, right? He hasn't won Best Picture.
Correct.
No, he has not.
Yeah. He's won for screenplays or editing. Or did he win a directing one?
No, he did not win a directing one. I believe he won a screenplay for Black Klansman.
Yes. Yes, he did.
And he's got an honorary one, maybe?
I think so.
I thought Chirac won. Chirac didn't win.
No, it did not.
Yeah.
Chirac did not win.
I love that script. It's really good. It's Chicago. It's classic Greek. It's great. Anyway.
Let me throw one more out there that I actually think it might fit into overhyped because I remember seeing it. I was excited to see it because I don't hate the triplets at all, but I think The Shape of Water It's a really bizarre choice in the same year where you have Call Me By Your Name, you have Dunkirk, you have Get Out. I think Get Out and Lady Bird are both leaps beyond The Shape of Water in terms of being a quality film. It's bizarre. It's just like, why? I don't know. I mean, I don't get it. I never got it.
This is another thing that happens with the Oscars, that's at some point in a year, a film just like develops momentum for whatever reason and gets a push behind it. And it develops a narrative that this is the movie this year. And The Shape of Water is maybe the most bizarre example of it. Like, Del Toro is so hit and miss as a filmmaker. Like, are they always fascinating to look at? Is the design like crazy balls fantastic? Yes. Yeah. That is just a weird movie, especially as an Oscar winner. Like, I just don't buy it.
It's part of that trio. Like those three guys, like the three great Mexican auteurs how many of the last 10 have they won? Like, it was a wild run that those guys went on.
I think Iñárritu has won twice for director, Cuarón has won twice for director, and Del Toro won for director, and then Birdman and Shape of Water won Best Picture as well. So, yeah. It's a pretty good track record. But yeah, that's a pretty good pick too, in terms of like the most bizarre choice, because all of those other movies are way better than Shape of Water. Shape of Water is just so weird. Like, it is one of the more mystifying choices, though I didn't think it was a bad movie. It just didn't seem like an Oscar winner to me.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's start whittling these down. Here's what we're looking at right now as far as the robbers go. But we've got 1994
Sorry, Mark. I got one more robber.
Okay.
I think The English Patient is a robber. I think Fargo should have won the Oscar.
Fargo should have won. I have that on the list. I forgot to mention.
You almost like go back and like if you're listing, if somebody was like, Hal, just throw out movies that have won Best Picture, I would definitely say Fargo at some point, completely forgetting that they lost to The English Patient.
Yeah. Well, and we've also, there's another one I want to throw out too, if we're throwing extras out. And while we're on this, Spielberg kick, 1983 Raiders, 82 E.T., let's go with Saving Private Ryan. What do you think about Shakespeare in Love beating Saving Private Ryan?
I like Shakespeare in Love a lot. Yeah. I think Ryan is good. I think it was a little overhyped that year. Yeah. I don't think that's an egregious win. I don't think Private Ryan is an all-timer. I think the Omaha Beach sequence is like unforgettable. I saw it on opening day and the film broke down and they had to give us our money back. I had to return a week later and see that Omaha Beach sequence again.
That scene is incredible.
Yeah, it's a tough watch though. I mean,
it is.
I can't imagine.
It's a really tough watch. But the movie's a little overlong. I think it is probably a top 10 Spielberg, but I feel like it's a little overhyped. And I think Shakespeare in Love was, again, it's got that Miramax push behind it. So that's a little gross as well, but it's a thoroughly charming movie. I don't know. That doesn't seem to be one of the bigger gulfs to me.
Right. Yeah. And it's also like it's pretty much a flawless film.
I love Shakespeare in Love. Yeah.
The fact that you can enjoy it at any level of theatrical literacy speaks to how well made it is. Some of these are chocolate and vanilla. Sometimes it's not the movie you want because you have a very serious war film versus this beautiful period romance comedy. So they're just not the same movie. Right. And I think their quality level, like, I think I disagree with Craig a little bit on Saving Private Ryan. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's really good. It's not one I revisit because it's such a difficult watch. But as soon as Spielberg won for Best Director, I was like, oh, they're going to give Shakespeare in Love Best Picture. I remember watching the Oscars. I might have even said it out loud because it was so clear. Those were the two movies that were just head and shoulders above everything else.
Yeah.
I'll throw out a few honorable mentions. You don't have to add to the list, but just to mention them. Going My Way over Double Indemnity looks pretty wrong-headed in retrospect. Gladiator over Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And, I can't believe we haven't mentioned A Beautiful Mind, which is really not a great choice as well.
What else was there that year? That was a pretty weak year.
I mean, Fellowship of the Ring was the best movie by far, but I think there was always the perception that he would win for the third one, which he did with Return of the King. But like the gulf between A Beautiful Mind and Fellowship of the Ring is pretty big.
Yeah.
It feels like Gosford Park could have won, and that you would have gone, oh, that makes sense. That's a perfectly good winner to have.
Very English. Yeah. Robert Altman. Sure. Yeah. Good pedigree.
Witty.
All right. So what's sticking out as the biggest gulf that we're thinking about? Are there some that the gulf seems wider than others just off the top of your heads?
The big ones for me.
Is there one rising to the top for you?
The big ones for me are Green Book Roma.
Mm-hmm.
How Green Was My Valley, Citizen Kane, and Chariots of Fire, Raiders.
Yeah, I think those are all really good choices. And I know, obviously, knowing the story of why Citizen Kane didn't win, that it's understandable. Like, you can understand the mechanics of what happened, but it is and has been for many years. And I know it goes in and out of the top spot, but it is widely enough considered the greatest film ever made that it is ridiculous that it walked away. I think they got the screenwriting Oscar. His co-writer did. And I know they fought over the credit and hated one another. Yes. Mank, he and Mank did not get along, but I think the fact that it didn't win Best Picture is like patently, it's the biggest whiff in Oscars history, I would say.
Yeah. Did you guys ever see that movie, RKO 281? It's Liev Schreiber.
No, Liev Schreiber is Wells, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Jim Cromwell is Hurst.
Orson Welles and Me, or Me and Orson Welles, whatever the name of that movie.
I saw that as well. Yeah.
That's a very charming movie.
All right, so we're looking at Chariots of Fire over Raiders, Green Book over Roma, How Green Is My Valley over Citizen Kane, and then the relics, the Broadway Melody, Crash, and Around the World in 80 Days. I'm going to say, based on this conversation, I will throw this out there. It seems the ones that excited us the most and got us the most fired up, away from crapping on the Broadway Melody, aside from the Broadway Melody being maybe objectively the worst movie of these, it seems like the ones that got us fired up the most were Crash and Green Book. That fair to say? Can we whittle it down to those two, or are we going to keep How Green Is My Valley and Chariots of Fire in the mix?
I think those are the bottom two. Those are the ones I came into today thinking about the most.
Green Book and Crash, and I'll take Broadway. Broadway Melody, you just skated through on this one. You are on notice.
I don't know how you don't put How Green Was My Valley in there, guys, because it's the movie that won over Citizen Kane. It's so ridiculous. Like for both of these other films, there were obvious choices that would have been better winners for sure. But none of those are the greatest movie ever made.
Well, I think you're right, Hal, that's the biggest gulf. Green Book already lost to Crash in the other category, so we know it can't win overall. So it feels like the finalists should be How Green Was My Valley versus Crash.
Well then, let me ask this. Now I go back to the very beginning of this episode, and I think we have to determine what the question is. And the question, as asked, was, what is the worst Best Picture Oscar winner? Now, do we play semantics in this and really make it about parsing those words out? Because it seems like How Green Was My Valley is not the winner, is the noun, right? The noun is the winner. The movie itself is the winner. That means that we're talking about the movie that is the worst among these. It's not worst Best Picture decision. The decision, it might be that the decision to not give Citizen Kane Best Picture over How Green Was My Valley may very well be the worst Best Picture decision. But the question is, what's the worst Best Picture Oscar winner? That to me implies that it's asking about the movie itself. Now we've got Green Book in both of those categories, as the movie itself is, I mean, aside from Mahershala Ali's performance and the other good performances in it, that it is of the movies that we're talking about, that Crash and How Green Was My Valley might be the worst movie. What do you guys think?
The noun I put the emphasis on is winner.
That's what I mean. But the winner is the movie. The winner is not the decision to name it the winner.
The thing about all these movies have in common is you look at them and you go, really? That one?
Good point.
That one won, and for different reasons. This one was really bad. This one is clearly white savior complex, and this one happened to win over the greatest movie ever made. Like,
well, let me ask you guys this.
They all are, and I'm not saying that weighs it above the others, but there's three egregious errors, either because the movie is bad or just absolutely the wrong choice. And history has proven it out.
Well, let me ask you this then, using the word really as the barometer of this. All of these movies make us go, really? Does one of them stand out and make us go, really?
I don't know if this could be a tiebreaker, but I have pulled up the top quote from Crash and How Green Was My Valley. And if you would indulge me, I can do a dramatic interpretation of the top speech from each movie.
Please.
And if you, I won't reveal which is which, by the way.
Sure.
Okay.
See if we can get
so if you'll allow me to do both speeches, and then perhaps you could vote on which feels like the worst speech.
Please. Yes. Speech number one.
Okay. How to do a Welsh accent.
You just gave away.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. It's about every ethnicity, ethnicity in Los Angeles.
Yeah. You don't think there are Welsh people out here, Mark? Look around.
There's so many Welsh people.
There could
be
the
Little Wales?
Yeah.
Little Wales?
Yeah. Oh, it's so great there. Always cold.
You've been lucky, Hugh. Lucky to suffer and lucky to spend these weary months in bed. For so God has given you a chance to make the spirit within yourself. And your father cleans his lamp to have good light, so keep clean your spirit by prayer, Hugh. And by prayer, I don't mean shouting, mumbling, and wallowing like a hog in religious sentiment. Prayer is only another name for good, clean, direct thinking. When you pray, think. Think well what you're saying. Make your thoughts into things that are solid. In that way, your prayer will have strength, and that strength will become a part of you, body, mind, and spirit.
Okay, so
Speech
that could
number
be
two.
from either movie. Speech number
two. It's the sense of touch. In any real city, you walk, you brush past people bump into you. In LA, nobody touches you. We're always behind this metal and glass. I think we miss that touch so much that we crash into each other just so we can feel something.
Well, Hal, that is quite the list of nominees, I must say, but there can be only one winner.
People of the world, if your movie's so bad that it can beat the movie that beat Citizen Kane, it's the worst Academy Award winner. Did you hear speech number two? You couldn't even do it in a Welsh accent. It's just impossible. If you tried, you would burst into flame. Shame on you, Academy voters. Shame.
Isn't that the requirement? That's the official phrase that you have to say within a month of moving to LA is you never see anybody. You're in your car all the time.
And that's also,
we have to crash into each other just to feel something.
Yeah. If it only had, it's raining. We needed that. That would be the only thing that you could add that would make it feel more authentically. We needed that.
I don't want to take the 405.
It's so bad. I was so prepared to go to the mat for How Green Was My Valley. And then I think 3 words into that speech, I was like, there's just no way. There's just no way. Crash is the worst Best Picture winner. Asked and answered. I need to take a freaking shower.
Poor Don Cheadle has to say those words too. Don Cheadle, a great actor.
Oh, great Don
Brilliant
Cheadle.
Actor.
Not an Oscar winner yet.
Did he not win?
No.
I thought he won for Hotel Rwanda.
Nominee for Hotel Rwanda.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, he should win. He's very good. And he's War Machine.
He sure is.
Yeah.
How come he didn't win for Ocean's 11? That was such a convincing British accent.
Yeah, he was brilliant in that. Right, as his Cockney bomb maker. Wait, that wasn't a Welsh accent? Why didn't he do that accent in Crash?
Muck it up.
I also want to apologize to your Welsh listenership, by the way.
Both of you, Craig apologizes.
Yeah. Great. I'll call Paul Freeman and tell him. He's the only Welshman I know. Craig Cackowski, thank you for being here, brother. This was a lot of fun.
Long overdue.
Oh, man, what a blast.
You're the best. Yep. What's going on right now? Where do you want people to find you? Or
Culver City. I just moved. I just moved to Culver City.
Oh, you did?
After 13 years in Atwater Village, My wife and I have relocated to the west side of LA.
Oh my goodness. West side. Best.
We literally just completed the move today in pouring rain.
Wow.
Like, it's been the rainiest week of the year in Los Angeles, the worst possible week to move.
10th worst storm in LA history.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
We'll be doing that category in a couple of years, probably.
Oh my God.
If we're still here.
Sure.
But yeah, I tried to convince Carla to let us move everything ourselves because I'm cheap, and I'm so happy that we got movers because they just saved our lives on the rainiest day. But yeah, that's I'm improvising around town. I teach at the World's Greatest Improv School, it's called World's Greatest Improv School, WGIS, run by Will Hines. So if you're looking to take a improv class either in person or online, go to wgimprovschool.com.
Well, I highly recommend you take an improv class from Craig Cackowski because Hal and I have both done it. You have drilled us, and it remains one of my great improv experiences was Craig running us through the drills one day and just working us out harder than I've ever worked out in an improv setting. So you're the GOAT, my friend. Thank you for coming on and talking about this stuff. We knew you'd be great. And guess what? The experts have weighed in and this topic is closed, but there are many more topics to discuss. So please reach out to us via email at wegotThisPodcast@gmail.com, or
you can go to our Facebook group, facebook.com/group/WeGotThisPodcast. Join the conversation there, and every single day. Oh, they're playing right now. I'd like to thank producer Ken Plume. You can support him at patreon.com, Ken Plume. Nobody does it alone. I'd like to thank researcher Kate McManus, graphic designer Eric Kelman, and QA engineer Jen Alba.
And I would also like to thank our musicians, Jonathan Dinerstein and Mike Furman, for our score and theme song, respectively. And I would like to thank you, the people of the world, for giving us
Ken Plume made one of the greatest podcasts of all time.
Hey, you're not going to let me finish?
You gonna let me finish?
To all those out there, the people of the world, I say thank you for letting us crash into you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. For Hal Lublin, I'm Mark Gagliardi.
For Mark Gagliardi, I'm Hal Lublin. And don't worry, everybody.
We got this.
We got this.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows
supported
directly
by you.